What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown. This is Heresy Financial, and if you'll notice, I've got a very special guest with us today. This is my son, Elijah. Elijah, say hi to everybody and tell them how old you are.
Hi, and I'm 5.
5 years old. And so we're making this video. A lot of you recognize this mug that I have normally up here on the shelf behind me. This mug is an End the Fed mug, and I sell it in the merch shelf below. But the other day, Elijah was walking by my office, and he saw the mug up there, and he asked me what End the Fed means. So we had a conversation about it. We talked about it, and he asked a lot of questions. And then a couple days later, he wanted to talk about it again, so I said, why don't we make a video about it? So in this video, what I want to do is I will explain the Fed again to you and explain why I say to end the Fed, and then ask me any questions along the way if it doesn't make sense. And then at the end of the video, I want you to explain to everybody why to end the Fed. All right?
Well, what I remember, you mean?
Yeah, what you remember.
Okay.
Yeah. All right?
Okay.
Let's dive in. All right, so if you want to know why I say to end the Fed, the first thing we have to understand is what the Fed is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the Fed is a short word for the Federal Reserve. So that's the whole name of it, Federal Reserve.
Okay.
And the Federal Reserve, their one job is making money. They're the ones that print all of the money. And they give this new money to two different people. They give some of the money to the banks, and they give some of the money to the government. So we've talked about taxes before, right? Do you remember what taxes are?
Mm-hmm.
What are taxes?
It's where people take money.
Who takes money?
The bank?
Not the bank.
The Federal Reserve?
The government.
The government, yeah.
The government. So taxes are when the government takes money from you, right? But they spend a lot of money. And do you think they take a lot of money in taxes?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do take a lot of money in taxes, but they spend a lot more than they take in taxes. So the other way that they have to get money is by borrowing it. Now, if you borrow money from somebody, what do you have to do later?
Give more money.
You have to give it back, right?
Yeah.
So have you borrowed money from me before?
Sometimes.
Yeah. And then you buy the thing that you wanted to buy, or you do something with it. And then later, what do you have to do?
I have to give you money back.
You have to give me that money back. Right. So the government, they borrow money from people like you and me. If we wanted to give the government money and we wanted to lend it to them, what would they have to do later then?
They would have to give it back.
They'd have to give it back to us. Yeah. Do you know how much money the government has borrowed?
No.
$28 trillion.
What?
Trillion. So do you think that they can ever give that money back?
No.
No, it's way too much. But they still are spending more than they're getting from all the taxes that they take. So that's where the Federal Reserve comes in. So do you remember the other day when we were playing Monopoly and you were the banker?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think in Monopoly, what do you think would happen if the bank ran out of money?
I don't know.
If we read the rules, we can go read the rules. It says if the bank runs out of money, the bank doesn't actually run out of money. You just get more pieces of paper and you draw the money on the new pieces of paper. So the bank can just create more money. So in the game of Monopoly, the bank is kind of like the Federal Reserve. So when the government needs more money, they've already borrowed more than they can ever pay back. Like if you borrowed $1 trillion from me, do you think you could ever give me back $1 trillion?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Because then you would have to give me more money by paying chores.
Yeah, exactly. And it would take you a long time to earn $1 trillion from chores, right? Mm-hmm. So the government probably can't ever get enough money to pay that back, but they still need to spend more money because they're always wanting to spend more money. So they get that money from the Federal Reserve. So that's the one thing that the Federal Reserve does. The Federal Reserve gives a lot of money to the government so that the government can spend as much as they want. The second thing, do you remember what the second thing was that I said the Federal Reserve does? Who they make money for?
No.
Regular banks.
Yeah.
So this one we're going to have to talk about gold coins, okay?
Okay.
So this right here is a gold coin, right? Mm-hmm. So things like this people used to use for money. Mm-hmm. So you know how right now if you have money in your hand, it's usually going to be like a paper dollar. This used to be how people bought and sold stuff. They had gold and silver coins. And so when you'd go to buy something somewhere, you'd give them your gold coin, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when all money was gold and silver, where does gold and silver come from originally? Does it come from the sky?
No.
Where does it come from?
Federal Reserve?
No. Before that, where does all the gold and silver come from? Does it come from the ocean?
No.
Is gold and silver, is it wood? Is it wood?
No.
Is it metal?
Huh?
Yeah. Where does metal come from? Do you know?
No.
Oh, it comes from the ground. So
Oh.
it's mixed into all the rocks that are in the ground. And so if you want to get more gold or silver, one way to get it is you can dig big holes in the ground, find the rocks that have gold and silver in them, and you can melt them down and get all the gold and silver out. So that's the only way to get more gold and silver.
Yeah, but how will you know if it's a rock that has...
Gold or silver in it?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times you can see it. So you see all the little pieces of metal inside the rock. And then when you can see it, then you know the areas that have it, and then they dig up a lot of those rocks, and then they can melt them down and see how much they can get out of them. And so that's the only way to make new gold and silver, is to dig it out of the ground and then melt it down.
Yeah, but how does it get so clean?
That's a process called refining, where they melt it, they clean it, they melt it again, they clean it, and they just keep on doing a lot of different things to it until they get everything out of it so that it's pure gold or pure silver.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only way to make more money. If all of the money was gold and silver, the only way to make more money is to go dig it out of the ground. Now, do you think that's hard or easy to get that money out of the ground?
Hard.
Very hard. So do you think that the amount of money that there is when it was gold and silver, do you think it would grow really quickly or not grow a lot at all? Do you think people would be getting a lot of new gold and silver out of the ground, or just a little?
A little.
Just a little, that's right. And so that means that prices are relatively stable. And I'll explain what that means in a second. In the game of Monopoly, let's pretend now that the banker decides they're going to give everybody $100. So you were playing the banker, you give everybody $100. Do you think you can afford to play the game more or less when you get more money like that?
More.
Yeah, it would be easier at first, right? Yeah. Now, we didn't play this when we were playing Monopoly, but because we play Monopoly Junior, but in the regular Monopoly game, you can sell your properties to each other.
Oh.
So do you remember how sometimes somebody would land on chance and we'd take a property from each other?
Yeah.
So in the regular game, you can buy and sell properties from each other. And so if I have $100, do you think I'm going to try and buy a property from you? Yeah. And if I say I'll buy a property for you at $1, are you going to say yes or no?
No.
No. What if I say I'll give you $50 for a property? Are you going to say yes or no?
Probably yes.
Probably yes. What if I say I'm going to give you $100 for a property?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so what you notice is if everybody gets a lot of more money that's just been given to them, just been printed, then people can spend a lot more money really fast, right? But what that does to prices is it makes prices go up, because now that property that I just bought for you cost $100. That's not how much it used to cost, right? It used to cost $1 or $3 or $5, right? So do you see how making a lot of new money makes prices go up? Because everybody has a lot more money to spend. And so prices start going up as people try and buy and buy and buy and buy. But the way things used to be It was just gold and silver, and there wasn't a lot of new money being created, so prices weren't able to just go up and up and up, right? So then how did things change? Well, people started putting their gold coins in the bank because you might not want to walk around with your gold coins anymore because you might be afraid somebody might steal it, or maybe it's heavy, right? Feel that? Do you feel how heavy that is?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. So people would give their gold to the bank, and then the bank would write them a note that said, you can come back and get this amount of gold at any time. And so then you'd take that note. It was a piece of paper or a receipt. And so if you then wanted to buy something, that person might go to the bank, give their receipt, get their gold back, and then go spend their gold. But then that person would just go take the gold to the bank, and then the bank would give them a receipt. So people realized, hey, I can just take my paper, because if I can go get my gold with this paper, I'll give you the paper, and then you can go get my gold with the paper if you want. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, the paper became the money because people were used to using paper as money.
First there was receipts, but then it changed to cash.
Yes. Yep. That's where cash came from. Yep. And the bankers got sneaky, and they realized that nobody was turning in their dollars for gold anymore. And so the banks started lending out the gold. And so that if...
Wait, what is lending out?
Lending out means somebody borrowed that gold from the bank. And so then if you and I both have paper that says we can go get our gold, if we go and try and get our gold from the bank might be like, oh, we don't have your gold. We just let somebody else borrow it. So do you think we'd be mad about that or happy about that?
Mad.
Mad about that. So that practice, that did two things. The first thing it did was it increased the amount of money that there was, right? Because if you have money from your paper, I have money from my paper, now somebody else has money from the gold. Now that's more money, because before it was just the paper that you and I had, right? Mm. And so what happens when more money comes into existence? What happens to prices?
It gets expensiver.
Yeah. And so when the banks started letting people borrow the gold, it started making prices go up. And then the other thing that happened is when you and I went to go get our gold, the bank didn't have it, so the bank would close down, and then lots of people would not actually have the amount of money they thought they did because the bank kind of stole it. It's called fraud. They lied.
But when is the part coming up where they printed more of the receipts?
Right now.
Oh.
So, do you think so the government makes laws and rules, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that the government should have said you're not allowed to do that, or you are allowed to do that to the banks? Do you think they should have said banks keep on lying to people, or banks you're not allowed to do that?
Not allowed.
Yeah, they should have said you're not allowed to do it. But what the government did instead was they started doing it themselves. So they said if you want to be a bank, you can still do this, but you have to do it through the government. You have to have a license. Like, you know how did you know you have to have a license to drive?
Yeah.
Okay, so the government said you can do this as long as you do it with our rules. And the rule was we're going to make a bank on top of all of the banks called the Federal Reserve. And that way, as a bank, if you let too many people borrow money and you don't have enough, then you can just go get more money from the Federal Reserve. Now, do you think that this solved the problem, or do you think that made it worse?
Worse.
It did make it worse. In 1971, which was 50 years ago, the Federal Reserve, they didn't have enough gold to give to the banks. All the banks ran out of gold, and the Federal Reserve didn't have enough. And there were banks all around the world that had their gold with the Federal Reserve, or they thought, but there wasn't enough. So everybody in the world was trying to go get their gold, but just like happened before, everybody went to go get their gold with their paper. There wasn't enough. And the Federal Reserve then said, no more, and we are not going to give gold anymore. You guys can keep your paper. So that's when cash became the real money, and it was no longer gold. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now the Federal Reserve doesn't have to have any gold because they told everybody we're not going to give gold for your cash anymore. So now everybody just uses cash for money. That means the Federal Reserve can make as much cash as they want. Because I can't take my dollar to the Federal Reserve and get gold from them anymore. So since they don't need to keep a bunch of gold in their vault, they can just print as much money as they want. And so that's what they started doing. They started printing a lot of money, printing a lot of cash for the banks, printing a lot of cash for the government. So what do you think happened to the total amount of money since then? Do you think it stayed the same? Do you think there was a lot more money since then, or do you think it went down and there's less money?
It went up.
Oh, up. Do you think it went up a lot or a little?
A lot.
A lot. Yep, it went up a lot. Now, remember what happens in Monopoly if the amount of money goes up a lot? What happens to prices?
They go up.
They go up. So do you think that since the Federal Reserve has made a lot of money in the last 50 years, do you think prices have gone up a lot or gone down or stayed the same?
Gone up.
Gone up. A little or a lot?
A lot.
A lot. Yep. And so the Federal Reserve prints a lot of money, and they give that money to the banks, and they give that money to the government. And all of that money that they create then ends up in people's bank accounts, and you can spend it. People get it from their jobs or from their investments, because all that money starts to make its way to everybody. And then prices go up as a result. And so when prices go up, do you think that makes it harder for people or easier for people?
Harder.
Harder. So like if you wanted to go be able to buy a set of Legos, would you like it if it was cheaper or more expensive?
Cheaper.
Cheaper, because then you maybe can buy 2 of them, right? So it's better for people if prices go down, and it's harder for people if prices go up, right?
Yeah.
And so that is why I say end the Fed, because they're the ones that make all of the money, which makes prices go up because they make a lot more money and they're always making more money. And so it makes prices go up, and that makes it a lot harder for most people to live. Because if your groceries get more expensive, if your food gets more expensive, do you think that means your job is going to start paying you more money? No. If your Legos get more expensive, am I going to give you more money for your chores, or are you going to have to do more chores?
More chores.
More chores, right. And so the same thing, if somebody has a job and they go to their job and they tell their job, they say, hey, my groceries got more expensive. Do you think the job is going to be like, okay, well, here's more money? Or do you think the job is going to say, you can work more?
Work more.
Yeah, exactly. So when prices go up, it makes it harder for everybody to be able to live. And the Federal Reserve is the one that makes prices go up by printing so much money. And so that's why I say to end the Fed. So where does the government get their money from?
The Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve and...
Banks.
Nope. From taxes.
Oh, yeah.
And from borrowing.
Yeah.
So what does the Federal Reserve do?
Makes more money. So the Federal Reserve never runs out of money.
Right, because they're the ones that create all the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who do they give that money to?
The banks and... I can't remember the name.
Is it the government?
Yeah, the government.
So the banks and the government. So the Federal Reserve creates new money, and then they give it to the banks and the government. And then what happens once everybody starts getting a bunch of that new money? What happens to prices?
They go up.
They go up. Do you have any more questions about it?
No.
About what we talked about?
No.
Okay.
But there is one more thing about your cup.
About my cup?
Yeah, why is there a tic-tac-toe on there?
A tic-tac-toe right there. That is called a hashtag, and it is the shape of a tic-tac-toe game. And a hashtag is something that you use on the internet on different websites. And then whatever words you put after it, you can then look it up and see all the other people who have written that same thing.
Yeah, but I knew that wasn't actually a tic-tac-toe.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, well, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope this was helpful. And for anybody who has kids and wants to explain the Federal Reserve and government and taxation and money printing and inflation to your kids, as always, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Can you say bye to everybody?
Bye.